The emergency alert blared through the Galactic Council's communication center, its harsh tone cutting through the usual quiet hum of machinery. Red lights flashed across the curved walls, reflecting off the smooth metal surfaces and casting strange shadows in the room. At the main control station, First Monitor Tom lifted his head from his display screen. His antenna twitched as he processed the incoming signal. The message was automated, but the fear in the artificial voice was clear. Emergency, emergency. Mining Colony X-227 requires immediate assistance. Critical system failure imminent. Atmospheric processors failing. This is not a drill. Any available emergency response teams, please respond. Tom's thin fingers danced across the holographic display, pulling up the colony's details. His four eyes widened as he read the information. X-227 was a heavy mining operation on one of the most dangerous planets in charted space. The gravity alone would crush most species. The atmosphere was a toxic soup of chemicals that would eat through standard protection suits in minutes. Control Center to Mining Colony X-227. Tom spoke into his communication device. We receive your distress signal. Please provide status update. The response came between bursts of static. Thank the stars. We have multiple failures in our atmospheric processing units. Toxic gases are leaking into our living quarters. We've sealed off 3 sections already, but we're losing ground. The gravity makes it impossible for our maintenance teams to reach the control systems. Tom quickly sent the alert to all nearby emergency response fleets. The answers came back faster than he expected, but they all said the same thing. Unable to assist. Conditions exceed safety parameters. Our ships cannot handle that gravity well. Environmental hazards too severe for our species. Regretfully decline. No suitable equipment for toxic atmosphere. The First Monitor felt his heart sink. He knew what these responses meant. The colony had less than 12 hours before complete system failure. Without help, over 300 miners would die. That's when he remembered something from his training days. A lecture about a newly discovered species from a planet that most advanced races considered impossible for life. A world of crushing gravity, extreme temperature swings, and constant natural disasters. The inhabitants called it Earth. Tom's fingers moved quickly as he accessed the special communications channel, the one they only used when dealing with Deathworlders. The request went out. Emergency situation. Mining Colony X-227. Requirements. Must operate in 2.3 standard gravity. Must handle Class 8 toxic atmosphere. Must have physical capability to perform maintenance in extreme conditions. Payment. Triple standard rate. For 3 long minutes, there was no response. Tom watched the colony's life support readings continue to drop. Then a new message appeared on his screen. It was from Earth's Emergency Response Fleet. The message was simple. Query. You call that extreme conditions? Response. We accept. ETA 4 hours. Please provide technical specifications for atmospheric processors. Earth ERT ship Last Hope deploying. Tom stared at the message in disbelief. He had studied Earth's statistics. To them, 2.3 gravity was challenging but manageable. Their planet's varied atmospheres had forced them to develop advanced filtration systems centuries ago. What the Council considered impossible, they considered just another difficult day. He sent the technical specifications and warned them about the dangers one more time. Following protocol. The human response made his antenna curl in confusion. Acknowledged. Sounds like a standard Tuesday. Beginning approach vector calculations. Please inform colony help is coming. Tom turned to his communication panel and contacted X-227. Help is on the way. Hold your positions and maintain current safety protocols. He paused before adding, we're sending a Deathworlder. The relief in the colony manager's voice was immediate. The human. Thank the stars. We might survive this after all. As Tom watched the Earth ship's signal appear on his long-range scanners, He wondered if perhaps the Council had been wrong about these Deathworlders. Maybe what they needed wasn't the most advanced species, but the ones who evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. He settled in to monitor the situation, knowing that the next few hours would either be a miracle or a tragedy. With humans involved, he suspected it would be both. Captain James stood at the bridge of his ship, Last Hope, reading the emergency briefing for the third time. His weathered face reflected in the dark glass of the view screen, lit by the soft blue glow of the ship's instruments. He wasn't a young man anymore. His hair had more gray than brown these days, but his eyes still held the sharp focus that made him one of Earth's best emergency responders. "Computer, show me the planet's conditions again," he said, taking another sip from his coffee mug. The screen lit up with numbers and charts. Most other species would see these readings and run the other way. Surface gravity, 2.3 times Earth normal. Atmosphere, mostly nitrogen and chlorine, with high levels of sulfur compounds. Temperature, a scorching 40 degrees Celsius in the shade. James smiled. It reminded him of that training mission in Venus's upper atmosphere last year. "Captain," his computer chirped, "incoming transmission from mining colony X-227. The screen flickered to life, showing an alien face. The colony manager looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a deer, with large worried eyes and delicate features. Their voice trembled slightly as they spoke. "Earth ship Last Hope, this is Colony Manager Reed. Are you sure you can handle these conditions?" The last response team that tried. They didn't finish the sentence. James leaned forward in his chair. "Manager Reed, I grew up in the Australian outback. Spent my weekends rock climbing in gravity suits for fun. Did my training in the Venusian colonies. Trust me, your situation is serious, but it's nothing we haven't handled before." The alien's eyes blinked in rapid succession. "But the gravity alone is about the same as what I exercise in," James interrupted gently. "We humans like to stay prepared. Right now, I'm more concerned about your colonists. How many are trapped in the sealed sections?" 42 in Section C, another 35 in Section D. Reed answered. "The atmospheric processors are failing faster than predicted. We have maybe 8 hours left." James nodded, already pulling up the colony schematics on another screen. "Send me the maintenance access codes. I'll start with the main processor core and work my way out. Have your medical team ready. Once I get those sections unsealed, people will need help." "But the maintenance tunnels, the safety systems are down. You'll be exposed to raw atmosphere, extra gravity, heat." James checked his suit readings one last time. "That's why you called a Deathworlder, isn't it?" A memory flashed through his mind. His first day at the Galactic Emergency Response Academy. The instructor, a tall, spindly alien, had looked at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "You humans," the instructor had said, "you come from a planet that should not support life. Your gravity is crushing, your atmosphere is corrosive, your weather patterns are lethal. You call Earth a moderate world. Do you understand how terrifying that is to the rest of us?" James hadn't understood then. Now, after years of being the last call for impossible rescues, he did. "Last Hope initiating landing sequence," the computer announced. "ETA to colony dock. 15 minutes. James stood up, his muscles easily adjusting to the ship's artificial gravity. "Manager Reed, have your people ready. I'll need a quick briefing on the colony's layout when I land. Then I'm heading straight for those processors." "The Council said you were our best hope," Reed said quietly. "They said humans don't know when to quit." James started his pre-landing checks, a slight grin on his face. "That's not quite right. We know exactly when to quit. Right after we succeeded. Last Hope out." As his ship began its descent toward the mining colony, James ran through his equipment one last time. Enhanced gravity suit, check. Multi-environment rebreather, check. Heavy-duty tools, check. First aid kit designed for multiple species, check. Just another day at work for a Deathworlder. The airlock door opened with a hiss, and Captain James stepped into chaos. Emergency lights pulsed red across the colony's main hall, and the air felt thick with fear. Dozens of aliens huddled near the central command post, their eyes fixed on the human who had just arrived. James felt the increased gravity immediately. Each step required more effort, but his training kicked in automatically. He adjusted his walking style, keeping his movements efficient and controlled. His suit's support systems hummed quietly, helping him bear the extra weight. Manager Reed hurried forward, moving carefully in the high gravity. "Thank goodness you're here. We've lost 2 more sections while waiting. The toxic gas is spreading faster than our models predicted." James nodded, already scanning the emergency displays on the wall. "Show me the quickest route to the maintenance sector." Reed pulled up a holographic map. The image flickered, showing red zones where the atmosphere had been compromised. "The main access tunnel collapsed an hour ago. The only way through is via the mining shafts, but in this gravity." "I'll manage," James said, checking his rebreather's seals. "What's the status of the atmospheric processors?" "Main control unit is completely down. Backup systems are failing one by one." Reed's voice shook. "We found something strange near the primary processor before the tunnels became too dangerous for our teams." James looked up sharply. "Strange how?" "There was damage that didn't match any system failure we've ever seen. It looked deliberate." The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. James' expression hardened. He'd seen this before. Corporate sabotage was becoming more common on frontier colonies. "How many people in the sealed sections still need evacuation?" he asked, switching to action mode. 77, trapped across 3 sections. Life support in those areas is running on emergency power. We have maybe 6 hours before total failure." James checked his equipment one final time. His heavy-duty utility belt carried everything he might need: plasma cutter, universal repair tools, emergency medical kit, and spare oxygen capsules. The enhanced gravity suit whirred softly as it adjusted to his movements. "Send all technical data to my suit's computer," he ordered, "and get me a direct feed to your control room. I'll need guidance once I'm inside the maintenance tunnels." As the data transferred, James walked to the entrance of the mining shaft. Each step felt like he was carrying another person on his back, but he kept his movements steady. The aliens watched in amazement. Where their own species could barely move in this gravity, the human walked with determination. The shaft entrance looked like a wound in the wall, dark and forbidding. James's suit sensors immediately picked up the toxic atmosphere leaking through the seals. The readings would have sent most rescue workers running. Instead, he double-checked his rebreather and turned on his suit lights. "Captain," Reed called out, "the shaft stretches for almost a kilometer before reaching the processor section. In this gravity, with the toxic atmosphere." James pulled out his plasma cutter, testing its weight. "Distance isn't the problem. Time is. Those people in the sealed sections are counting on these processors getting fixed." He paused at the entrance, looking back at the gathered aliens. "Keep the communication line open. If I find proof of sabotage, we'll need to document everything." With that, he stepped into the shaft. The gravity hit him harder here, trying to pull him down into the planet's core. His boots magnetized automatically, giving him better traction on the metal floor. The air around him swirled with visible toxins, kept at bay only by his suit's protective field. James switched on his helmet camera and started moving forward. The beam from his suit lights cut through the darkness, revealing walls covered in condensation and corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Somewhere ahead, 77 lives depended on him reaching the processors in time. Behind him, in the control room, the aliens watched their screens in tense silence. Their last hope was walking into what they considered a death trap. But for a human from Earth, a Deathworlder, it was just another challenge to overcome. The mining shaft groaned under the extreme pressure. James's suit sensors screamed warnings about the toxic levels in the air, but he pushed forward. His breathing was steady, measured, each step calculated in the crushing gravity. "Control room, I'm about 300 meters in," he reported, his voice slightly strained. "How are the readings from the sealed sections?" Manager Reed's voice crackled through his comm. "Life support down to 42% in Section C. The other sections aren't much better. Captain, we just lost contact with the backup processor." James stopped at a junction, checking his map display. The loss of the backup processor changed everything. Now they had even less time. He wiped condensation from his helmet's visor, the acidic droplets sizzling against his glove's protective coating. "Show me the fastest route to the main processor," he said, studying the holographic map floating in front of him. "There's a maintenance tunnel to your left," but Reed's voice caught. "The structural integrity is compromised. Our scans show multiple collapse points." James turned left, his suit lights revealing a partially collapsed tunnel. The walls were warped, bent inward by the planet's relentless gravity. Most species would see this as impossible to pass. James saw it as a puzzle to solve. He got down on his hands and knees, the gravity trying to pull him flat against the floor. The space between the collapsed sections was barely wide enough for him to crawl through. In normal gravity, this would be tight but manageable. Here, every movement felt like wrestling with an invisible giant. "I'm going through," he announced, starting to crawl forward. "That's impossible," someone in the control room shouted. "The pressure alone." "Impossible is what they called surviving on Earth," James grunted, pushing himself forward inch by inch. His suit creaked under the strain, but the reinforced materials held. Halfway through the collapsed section, his light caught something strange. There, on one of the support beams, was a clean cut. Too clean to be from natural stress. "Control room, I'm sending you images," he said, his helmet camera focusing on the damage. This wasn't an accident. Someone cut through these supports deliberately. The silence from the control room was deafening. James didn't wait for their response. He kept moving, his muscles burning from the effort. The gravity seemed to increase with every meter, but he refused to slow down. Finally, he emerged from the collapsed section. Standing up took all his strength, but he managed it. The processor control room was just ahead. Life support in Section C down to 35%. Reed reported, panic edging into their voice. "Whatever you're going to do, Captain, it needs to be soon." James reached the processor room's door. It was sealed, the control panel dark. He pulled out his tools, working quickly despite the crushing weight of his own body. "Control room, I need you to listen carefully," he said, connecting his suit's computer to the door's systems. "Once I get this door open, I'll have about 10 minutes to repair the processor before the toxic atmosphere starts affecting my suit. I need you to guide me through the repair sequence." 10 minutes. Reed sounded shocked. "Our best engineers estimated it would take at least an hour." James smiled grimly as he forced the door's circuits to reboot. "Your engineers aren't human. We've learned to work fast when lives are on the line." The door slid open with a screech of protesting metal. Inside, the processor room was a nightmare of flashing warning lights and damaged equipment. But more importantly, James could see more signs of deliberate sabotage. Cut wires, disabled safety systems, and a small device attached to the main control panel that definitely wasn't part of the original design. "I found our problem," he reported, moving toward the sabotage device. "Someone really didn't want this colony to succeed. Now, let's prove them wrong." The clock was ticking. 77 lives hung in the balance. But standing there in the crushing gravity, surrounded by toxic air that could kill him in minutes, Captain James felt strangely calm. This was what humans did best, surviving the impossible. Time was running out. James's hands moved quickly over the processor's controls, fighting against both the crushing gravity and his suit's increasingly stiff joints. The toxic atmosphere had started to eat away at his outer protective layer. "The sabotage device is connected to the main power grid," he reported, voice tight with concentration. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. If I remove it wrong, we'll lose all power to the sealed sections. Reed's voice came through with static. Life support in Section C is at 28% and falling. Section D just dropped below 30%. James studied the device, his experienced eyes taking in every detail. It was elegant in its deadliness, a small black box with multiple connections to vital systems. One wrong move would trigger a complete shutdown. "Control room, I need you to do something that's going to sound crazy," he said, pulling out his repair kit. "When I give the signal, I want you to shut down power to all non-essential systems. Every light, every computer, everything that isn't keeping people alive." "But we'll be blind," Reed protested. "We won't be able to monitor." "Trust me," James interrupted. "These saboteurs planned for everything except human stubbornness. We're going to overload their device with a power surge, but first, we need to build up charge in the main capacitors." A moment of silence followed. Then Reed spoke, their voice firm. "Everyone, prepare for temporary shutdown of all non-essential systems." James positioned himself by the main power coupling. His muscles screamed in protest. He'd been working in 2.3 gravity for almost an hour now. Most species would have collapsed long ago. But humans had evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill them. Giving up wasn't in their DNA. "Shut down in 3, 2, 1. Reed counted down. The processor room plunged into darkness. Only James's suit lights provided illumination. He could hear the power systems whining as energy redirected to the capacitors. "Charge at 60%, he reported, watching the readings on his suit display. 70%, 80%. Warning alerts flashed across his visor. The toxic atmosphere was beginning to seep through his suit's compromised outer layer. He had minutes left at most. 90%. Now. James slammed the power coupling into place. Electricity surged through the systems. The sabotage device sparked and smoked, its circuits overloading. For a terrifying moment, everything went silent. Then the processors roared back to life. Atmospheric controls responding. Reed's voice was jubilant. Toxin levels dropping in all sealed sections. Life support stabilizing. But James wasn't done. He yanked the fried sabotage device free, securing it as evidence. "The processors are working, but those people still need help. Send me the fastest route to Section C." "Captain, your suit has taken too much damage," Reed protested. "The toxic exposure levels are still within what I can handle," James finished. "Those people have been breathing bad air for hours. They'll need medical help." Without waiting for a response, he headed for the exit. The gravity felt even heavier now, his muscles fatigued from constant exertion. But each step was steady, driven by the same determination that had let humanity survive on their deadly homeworld. He reached Section C to find the door already cycling open. Inside, 32 aliens lay gasping in the gradually clearing air. Without hesitation, James began administering emergency oxygen, moving from person to person despite his own suit warnings becoming more urgent. "Control room," he called, helping another survivor to sit up. "Send medical teams to my location, and tell them to hurry. We have 2 more sections to clear." Through the colony's cameras, the control room staff watched in amazement. Here was a being from a death world, working past normal safety limits, ignoring the crushing gravity and toxic atmosphere, focused only on saving lives. Reed turned to their assistant. "Make sure every feed is being recorded. The council needs to see this. They need to understand what we've learned today." "What's that, manager?" Reed's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, watching the human work. "That sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the best one. Sometimes you need someone from a world that taught them to never give up." The colony's main meeting hall buzzed with activity. 3 days had passed since the emergency, and Captain James stood before the Galactic Council's emergency investigation team. His skin was still slightly red from toxic exposure, but he stood tall despite the lingering effects of working in high gravity. The head investigator, a tall blue-skinned alien named Blue, held up the destroyed sabotage device. "Captain, please explain to the Council how you discovered this." James pointed to the holographic display showing the damaged processor room. "The signs were clear once I got close enough. The damage patterns were too precise, too calculated. Normal equipment failure is chaotic. This was surgical." The room erupted in murmurs as James brought up more images on the screen. "Look at the cut marks on the support beams. The way the device was wired into critical systems. This wasn't just sabotage. It was meant to look like a cascade failure." Manager Reed stepped forward, their voice stronger now that the colony's air was clean again. "We've checked our security logs. 2 maintenance crews visited the processor room in the week before the failure. One was our regular team. The other," Reed paused, looking at the council members, "was from our corporate rival, Star Mining Corporation." Blue's antenna twitched in surprise. "That's a serious accusation." "One we can prove," James said, bringing up more data on the screen. "The sabotage device's power signature matches known Star mining tech. They wanted this colony to fail, making it look like an accident. They didn't count on someone being able to reach the processors in time." The council members whispered among themselves. One of them, an elderly alien with crystalline skin, spoke up. "This evidence will be examined thoroughly. But there's another matter we must address." They turned to face James directly. "Your actions during this crisis have forced us to reconsider our views on Deathworlders." James stood straighter, feeling the weight of the moment. "The feed from your suit cameras has been viewed by billions across the galaxy," the crystalline council member continued. "Many of us believed humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable to trust with emergency operations. We were wrong." Manager Reed stepped forward again. "If Captain James hadn't come, if we'd waited for a safer solution, 77 people would have died. Sometimes you need someone who evolved on a world that makes them stronger." The head investigator nodded slowly. "The Council has reached a decision. Effective immediately, Earth's emergency response fleet will be granted priority status for all high-risk situations. Additionally," Blue paused for effect, "we're recommending a permanent human presence on all frontier colonies." The room exploded in applause. James saw many of the colonists he'd saved cheering from the back of the hall. Their eyes showed no fear now, only respect and gratitude. "One more thing," Blue added, holding up a datapad. "We've analyzed the corporation's trading records. In the past year, similar accidents have happened at 3 other colonies. Each time, Star Mining bought the remains at a fraction of their worth." James's expression hardened. "They're going to try again somewhere else." "Not anymore," the crystalline council member declared. "Based on your evidence, we've frozen their assets pending a full investigation. The age of corporate sabotage in the frontier colonies ends today." As the meeting concluded, Manager Reed approached James privately. "The council members are still amazed that you kept going back into those toxic conditions to save everyone. They keep asking how humans can do such things." James smiled slightly. "Tell them it's simple. On Earth, we learned early that survival often means helping each other. A dangerous world didn't make us fear death. It taught us to value life more." Reed's eyes showed understanding. "Perhaps that's why the galaxy needed Deathworlders after all. Not for your strength or endurance, but for your refusal to abandon others." Outside the meeting hall's windows, ships were arriving with supplies and investigators. But more importantly, they carried new safety equipment designed to human specifications. The galaxy was changing, and humanity's reputation was changing with it. The age of fearing Deathworlders was ending. The age of learning from them had begun. 1 month after the mining colony X-227 incident, Captain James stood at his familiar spot on the bridge of Last Hope. The ship's viewport showed Earth in the distance, a blue marble that most species in the galaxy considered impossibly dangerous. To him, it was just home. His communication screen lit up with an incoming message from the newly formed Galactic Emergency Command Center. The center was a familiar face. Manager Reed, now promoted to Emergency Response Coordinator for the entire sector. Captain, Reed's image smiled. I trust you've received the new updates to your ship's systems. James nodded, looking at the enhanced displays around him. After the X-227 incident, the Council had upgraded all human emergency vessels with the latest alien technology. It was a strange feeling. Just months ago, most species had been afraid to share their advanced tech with unpredictable Deathworlders. The new gravity compensators are impressive, James replied. Though I have to admit, my crew keeps turning them down. We like to stay ready for the heavy work. Reed's expression showed a mix of amusement and amazement. That's exactly why we need you. The Council has finished implementing the new emergency protocols. From now on, all high-risk colonies must have at least one human on their permanent staff. James raised an eyebrow. How are the other species taking that? Better than you'd think. After seeing the recordings from X-227, most colonies are requesting human personnel. They're calling you living safety systems. Reed paused, mandibles twitching in what James had learned was their species' version of a grin. Though some are still nervous about having Deathworlders around. They'll get used to us, James said, checking his ship's readings. Any word on the star mining investigation? The Council found evidence of sabotage at 12 more colonies. They'd been shut down permanently. Reed's voice became serious. But that's not why I called. We have a situation on Colony Beta 9. Their environmental systems are showing strange readings. James straightened in his chair, similar to X-227. No, this is different. The colony is inside a gas giant's atmosphere. Pressure levels are far beyond what most species can handle. Reed hesitated. The Council says it's too dangerous to attempt a rescue. A slow smile spread across James's face. Send me the coordinates. I had a feeling you'd say that. Data's already transferred to your ship. Reed's image flickered. The Council wants me to remind you that the pressure levels are lethal to most known species. James was already checking the navigation systems. Most known species didn't evolve on a world with crushing ocean depths, volcanic vents, and pressure systems that can flatten steel. We did. That's why we called you first, Reed admitted. The Council is learning. Sometimes the most advanced civilization isn't the best choice for a rescue. Sometimes you need someone from a world that taught them to never give up. As James prepared his ship for departure, he looked one more time at Earth. From space, you couldn't see the raging storms, the volatile tectonics, or the extreme environments that had shaped humanity. You couldn't see the countless challenges that had forced humans to become stronger, more resilient, more determined. Last hope to Emergency Command, he said, engaging the engines. Tell Colony Beta 9 help is on the way. This Deathworlder is ready for another impossible day at work. The stars streaked past as his ship entered faster than light travel. In the vast darkness of space, a new era had begun. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not despite their dangerous homeworld, but because of it. The message spread across the galaxy. When all hope seems lost, when conditions are impossible, when death itself seems certain, call a Deathworlder. They'll find a way. Because that's what humans do best. They take the impossible, and they make it possible. One rescue at a time. As Last Hope sped toward its next mission, James smiled. The galaxy was learning what Earth had taught humanity long ago. The most dangerous worlds often create the strongest helpers. And sometimes, the last call is the best call. Especially when it's for a Deathworlder.